What is up, everybody? Welcome to this special 3-for-1 episode of Sales Stories in Real Life, the show where professional salespeople share their experiences on times that they were buyers. Today's guest is a superstar on LinkedIn. You know him for all of his incredible enterprise AE content. Mr. Jacob Karp, Enterprise AE at Rubrik. Make sure you follow him on LinkedIn. Jacob, I'm real pumped after our pre-show. We got a 3-for-1 for the people. You made the 3 biggest purchases of your life over the span of a decade, and every single one of them, you never actually met with a salesperson face to face. So let's hear it, man. I'm stoked.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. Hey, I'm super excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me. The premise of the show sticks out to me for that reason, right? I, as a buyer, am an interesting one because over the span of what eventually became a decade, I essentially purchased the 3 biggest things that I've ever bought in my life, all remotely, all via my cell phone and computer and email. So those 3 things are my wife's engagement ring, the first house we bought, and then the truck that I own today. So large scale purchases, never went face to face with an actual salesperson until the end to close the transaction. Did it all via cell phone, FaceTime, pictures they were sending me, things in email. And this was even before COVID, right? So I think about buying my wife's engagement ring, like this was 2017. People were still meeting face to face, wanted that trust and face to face. And then 2020 and 2021, buying the house, buying the truck. That was COVID life, but still people were doing things in person, but I just was like jamming with the phone and the email. So yeah, interesting. A lot of big purchases done without sitting down with anyone directly. So
Let's start with the first one, because the first one is the most intriguing to me, because pre-COVID, making a big purchase like that without ever meeting someone face to face was pretty borderline taboo. So, like, how did it go down? How did you get introduced to the folks? What kind of support were they giving you along the way? Just kind of give us a little breakdown of how the engagement ring purchase went down.
Yeah, for sure. So the year is, I guess it's late 2016 into early 2017. And basically, like, I was ready to propose to my wife. I thought about going to like some of the big box stores, right? I won't name them here, but people will know who they are. Where you go in and like you're going to talk to someone, you're going to think about stuff. But I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. So I started where like so many buyers start. I was just doing research on the internet. So when it comes to like engagement ring stuff, there's the 4 C's. Like as a buyer, you're like 60-70% down the road probably before you ever want to talk to someone. And I was that person. So I did that. I actually was ready to like go in and have the conversation with someone. And I texted a good friend of my wife's to like sort of validate, like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Like, do you have any suggestions for me? And this particular person was like, whoa. First off, let me just give you a referral to someone who will make this process extremely easy for you. So that was really step 1. She referred me to a diamond guy. It's funny. I love to like use air quotes, a diamond guy. And at the time I lived in Colorado, he lived in Chicago. So we just started interacting like back and forth via text, via FaceTime. One of the things that was really cool about him was he was like educating me as I was educating myself. No pressure, which is, how I like to sell as well, as like, we're in this together. It's a partnership. You're going to learn, I'm going to learn, and we're going to come together at the end. So that was really the impetus to what started, a lot of these big purchases, because I realized like you can be referred to people, you can find the right people, and they will guide you through the process, and you don't have to be in the same room with them.
2 huge points there. You were getting educated along the way, and he was selling with you, not at you. Ironically enough, the day that we're recording this, you actually just made a post today that really resonated with me, where you said something along the lines of like, if a vendor, if a buyer thinks of me as a vendor, I'm not doing it right, or something along those lines, or something like I want to be seen as a partner, not a vendor. So that hits squarely down the middle of the plate for your experience buying an engagement ring too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And the post, more or less, you nailed it. It's like, look, if you're referring to me as a vendor, as a seller, I'm not where I'm supposed to be yet. If I'm referring to you as a customer, like there's nothing wrong with that verbiage, but like, again, like we haven't crossed into this like partnership where we're together. We're still like vendor customer. Like I'm trying to be like, we're partners, we're going in the same direction, thinking about things the same way, and like accomplishing something together. So yeah, the engagement ring. So I buy the diamond, and then I'm like, okay, now I have a diamond. And I asked my brother, like, dude, I think you got your engagement ring done like custom, right? And he's like, okay, let me refer you to this person. So again, it was like the second iteration of it. Like then I'm communicating with a gal in Iowa who's like a custom jewelry maker. So like the diamonds flying to me, like I got to send it to her, like crazy stuff's happening. But again, like I'm not sitting down with anyone, not because I'm against it, but like I was just accomplishing what I needed to by virtue of like cell phone and computer. So
The power of a referral cannot be overstated. And maybe these days, I'll use your air quotes, someone would call it dark social. I mean, those are such invaluable channels. I would love to dive more into that one, but we got 3 stories to cover. So let's go to the house, because this is the most intriguing one for me, because it is obviously the most expensive by far. And you're talking about buying a house without ever seeing it. The amount of bills that you can find yourself in if you make a wrong decision is terrifying.
Yep.
So how did that all go down?
Yeah. So, and to wrap the first story, like that's referral and kind of segueing into community, right? So the second story is more like around community. So my wife and I, at the time, it's 2020, COVID's going on. Like you can't go look at houses. Like you can't meet a real estate agent. Like the world's crazy. We're living in Denver. We're moving to Florida for a variety of reasons. And we're looking to buy a house there, but we're not there. We're in Colorado. We can't get there. You know, like no one's flying. Like you're just locked in your house, right? So I'm talking to my wife about my now wife. So the engagement ring story did work out, obviously. So I'm talking to my wife, like, hey, what are we going to do? Like, we want to live in this area. Like, how are we going to figure this out? And she's like, oh, wait a minute. Like this girl that I went to college with is actually a real estate agent in that area. So then like, again, first story was kind of like referral. Now we're talking about community. She's thinking about like, who's in my community that could help me with this transaction. We reach out to her, and I mean, things went flawlessly. Like she identified a house that we wanted to purchase. She helped us through the entire process. Amazing woman, like takes videos of the whole house, like, but is like, oh, hey, we could negotiate on this because like this isn't done right. Anyway, like without the details, like community brings us to the right person. This person again helps through the transaction of like not selling us, but selling with us, like showing us the good, the bad, the ugly. Here's what you should be concerned about. Here's the video of like the entire house that she stitches together. So it was just crazy, and people thought we were nuts, but we purchased that house. It was seamless. And again, until the day we went to sign for the paperwork, when we eventually moved, never saw it in person, never saw the real estate agent in person.
That's a key distinction, because you could have the referrals, you could have the community, but eventually you got to fulfill, right? Someone's not just going to buy from you because they feel bad, right? Especially a house. I mean, come on. It's not like, well, trinkets here. We're talking about a home. So the fact that she was going the extra mile, right? Sending videos of every single nook and cranny, pointing out, hey, we can negotiate this, right? And do this. Whereas a higher purchase price is probably better for her, right? But meanwhile, she's going out of her way to find all these things that are wrong, getting them done for you. Was there any, say, maybe one kind of big standout moment, you know? Because, I mean, obviously it was your wife's friend. So for her, it was probably a little bit easier, right? Because she knows this person. She has a relationship with this person. For you, it's a little bit through the grapevine. So, like, was there a point for you that, like, the trust just kind of, like, really fell into place? Was it, like, instantaneous? You know, was it kind of like one step in the process that got you there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question. I think it was all throughout, right? And you hit it. Like my wife knows this person, so like I know that there's already some trust and rapport that's there, which I think is key. Like with referrals and community, like that's part of what gets you there. Is it's like someone telling you, like, I've worked with this person or I know them personally, like they are going to do a good job. One thing that our real estate agent did that I think really stuck out to me was like, I talked about the videos of the inside of the house, the backyard, like that's standard practice. But she knew that we had a baby on the way. And she was like, I want to show you guys how amazing this neighborhood is. So literally she brought a bike to the house, and she like rode around the neighborhood on her bike, like videoing like the parks, videoing the pool, like, oh, here's a family like playing over here. I was like, okay, you just took it next level. Like, one, that's some great salesmanship. So, but it was done for the right reasons of like, I want you guys to feel comfortable living here when you have a baby, because there's other people here in the community like in similar situations. So definitely went above and beyond. Plus, if anyone's been to Florida, riding a bike around, like, you're gonna get sweaty, you're gonna get nasty. So like, I'm like, all right, you're and you're real estate agent, you're like looking good, and then you're just ready to go ride around and get sweaty for me. Cool, let's do it.
I love that, man. It wasn't just selling the house, right? It was selling the whole community. Because that's huge, obviously, with a family, new child. Huge there. I love that. I would love to dive into all these more, but we have so much that we want to cover, and we want to save a little time at the end to talk about breaking into tech sales, because I love that story. So
Yeah,
let's do the last one, the car. We
yeah.
had Nate Nasrallah on talk about buying a car. And so you've got some big shoes to fill, Jacob. How did it all go down?
Oh man, I love Nate. And actually Nate has seen my other car that's not my new car, and I think made fun of me. So that hopefully he's listening to this one. So during the pandemic again, we have the baby, we buy the house, we got to get a bigger car for all these reasons. And we decide we want to purchase a truck. Actually, that again, going back with the theme, never, it's COVID, like I can't go to the dealership, or if I do, it's going to be like too much work. So I end up reaching out to this dealership where we were living, inquiring about a truck. The guy who gets a hold of me, like right away, I could tell he was not a car salesperson. And I don't say that in a derogatory way, but just like his demeanor, like the way he came onto the phone, asking questions about me, like, why are you guys buying? Like, what are you looking for? So we start on that, right? We talk. And then again, through the process, it's just texting. It's him calling and giving me updates, because the car was first new car I've ever purchased. It was like in transit from a factory, right? And instead of just being like, yo, this will be here on March 1st, like this guy is like calling me like every week, like, hey, just wanted to let you know, like, I just heard that it got through this part of the inspection. Like, it's coming. Like, oh, by the way, like, we got this truck on the lot. I'm not trying to sell it to you, but I just want to show you what like this feature is going to look like. So like little things along the way, because I'll be honest, of all the purchases, like I was the most skeptical about this car purchase. Like I was like wanting to bail the whole time, but these little things that he was doing was like drawing me in, like getting me excited, like, oh yeah, that is going to be sweet when we get that in like 6 weeks. So again, went through the whole process, closed the deal with him in person at the end, just like all the rest of them. Like the last step is me finally showing up. And I want to say one thing, like I'm a big proponent of people meeting in person. I'm not a hermit that just sits in my house. It's just crazy the amount of things you can accomplish these days just by virtue of like phones, email, FaceTime, etc.
Amen to that. I'm so intrigued about how you wanted to pull out of the deal the whole time, but it just like kept coming together, because I can't remember who exactly said this. So please give credits after where credits are due. But I know someone had always said like sales isn't like closing, right? Going back to the air quotes, it's not like closing, right? It's like a series of closes, right? It's like a series of yeses that you're going through. Like it's not just these one huge moments where like you pressure them into buying, right? It's like everything that's happening along the way, like all of the updates, like being transparent. So I guess like, was there any kind of like turning moment, through all of that for you where you were just like, you know what, now like I'm not feeling like, I want to back out anymore. Like I'm feeling like I'm ready to do this, or like, was it not so sudden like that? Or what would you say on that?
No, what's super interesting, and like you jogged my memory on this, is there was a point in the transaction. I want to say it was actually early, because I had to put like a deposit down, because like I said, like the car's in the factory, it's got to come out, and it's COVID, like car sales are out of control, like
Supply
everything's
chain.
up. Yeah, supply chain's a mess. And the guy actually called me and he's like, listen, they're gonna ask me to ask you to put $1,000 down on this car. He's like, it seems like trivial. He's like, but I'm not kidding you when I'm telling you like that is your way of securing this car. And I gotta tell you, like, it bothered me so much that I almost bailed. But like, and I told him, I'm like, hey, like, I don't really get it, man. Like, we've talked about this. Like, I've signed some paperwork and now I got to put $1,000. Like, I don't mean to make $1,000 sound trivial. Like, it's not the money. It's more like, I don't understand where this is coming from. And this guy literally was like, I'm going to call you back in 5 minutes. Goes outside and he's like telling me, like, on the side, like, kind of like buyer to customer, like, here's the why, like, hey, I don't necessarily agree with this, but like, here's why you got to do it. He's like, I'm not pulling your chain. So it was kind of like a moment where we connected more of like, he's not selling me the car and I'm not the buyer. It's more like mutual, like, friends in a way of like, yo, I know you got to do this. You don't love it. Anyway, so I went from, and I think a lot of our buyers have this, I went from almost just bailing on the whole process to like 5 minutes later, he reassured me, but not in a salesy way, to say like, this is part of our process. We have to do it, but I guarantee in 6 weeks, you're going to be pumped. And that's when then he starts sending the videos. Then again, like, just bringing me through the process, keeping me excited the whole time.
I would summarize that whole thing and he leveled with you, right? Like you got, it was like a salesperson buyer relationship. And then it was time to like do something that you weren't comfortable with. And it was kind of that friction point, and he leaned in instead of like trying to like almost weasel his way out of it, right? Or like strong arm his way through it.
Totally. Like, I think leaning in is, and kind of leveling with me is the right way to think about it. And like the two things he didn't do, which I respect him for, kind of to your point. One, he didn't try to pressure me to do it. And two, he didn't try to play the game of like, oh, let me go see if I can like get the manager to not do this for you. Cause we know like, yo, they're going to ask me for this $1,000. And he just kept it real. Like, they're going to make me do it. You're going to have to do it, but we'll both be happy at the end. I guarantee. So.
Bravo to all three of them, man. We can obviously keep going down this road, but I really, really, really want to hear about the breaking into tech sales, because I was today years old when I realized that you never started in sales. You and I are obviously been connected on LinkedIn for a while. You post like a career seller, like the theories, everything is spot on. Again, make sure you follow Jacob on LinkedIn. What would you say to that? Like, you know, where did everything start for you? Like, how did you break into tech sales? Where did you even start to begin with? Let's go through it.
Yeah, for sure. So I am now a decade into sales and 5 years into software sales, enterprise software sales. So it'll come off like I know what I'm talking about and I'm polished, and there are moments, and most of my insights are good ones, but there wasn't always that way. And I struggled to break in. So I actually have a journalism degree. When I went to college, I wanted to be a sports writer. I quickly realized, unfortunately, that you make about $18,000 a year when you come out of college. And that was not an option for me based on my family status. So like, I was like, all right, I got to make a little bit of money here. So I took the journalism and I pivoted it more to like public relations and like strategic media. So more of the idea of like telling stories, but looking to get coverage for your company or your brand, your product. Right. So the first 5 years of my career is that. And I realized over time, like, I really enjoy telling stories. I'm good at writing stories. And I had a friend who said, you know, you should really think about taking that storytelling ability and bringing it to the sales world. I'll be honest, this is 2013 at the time. I still had a negative stigma about sales. I think a lot of people still did, right? Like, people were still kind of like, like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. The profession was evolving, but so I started actually in cable hardware sales. So I was working at the cable company as a PR person, learning about the technologies. And then I had a friend ask me if I wanted to come sell to the cable company some of that technology. So that was the beginning. 10 years later, it's crazy to think, but I had success there, Alex, mostly because of like relating with people, being able to tell stories, like level setting with people, a lot of stuff we talked about earlier.
Yep.
But I had a second situation like later in my career when I tried to get into software sales that was just as hard, if not more difficult. And a lot of people have faced that barrier. And I think I've seen some people doing fantastic things in community and on LinkedIn of like trying to break that down, because I think that's still something that holds a lot of people back.
I was there too. I did not start in software sales. There is definitely a barrier there for whichever reason. What advice would you give to someone who's listening to this right now that wants to get into tech sales, and they either just keep hitting that barrier, they don't even know where to start? Obviously, you've done it successfully. You now made it all the way up to the enterprise. You're doing awesome. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we've had good conversations about this on the site. So here's what I'll tell you. The biggest, in my opinion, the biggest risk for people who are hiring folks in sales who have not been in software is that they're worried about the learning curve of those people. And I will attest, I didn't believe it before. The learning curve is actually massive. But you can learn before you get into that role in a way to expedite that learning curve and increase or decrease your ramp time, right? So if you want to be an enterprise software seller, or just a software seller, tech seller in general, start to learn the lingo, learn the metrics that matter. Like learn little stuff like what is ARR? What is ACV? What's the difference? Why does it matter? What is LTV? Like what is pipeline generation? Like you could go on and on, right? Because the thing is, like, a sales leader is worried about having to teach you all of those things, as well as the process, as well as how to generate pipeline, as well as how to learn the product's personas. If you remove that, if you come into an interview process, there's no guarantee you're going to get the job, but you will at least sound as though you have already gone out and done it.
This is something that sounds so small, but is enormous. And I'll tell like a 10-second story. My wife is from New Orleans, and anytime we speak to someone and they're like, oh, how do you like New Orleans? Immediately you're like, okay, you've never been there, right? You have no idea what you're talking about. So it's the same kind of thing where like knowing that lingo really, really, really matters a lot, right? I think that's awesome advice, and I don't hear anyone really ever giving that type of advice. What was like the break-in process for you? Is that kind of how you broke in? Is that like, you kind of looking back now and realizing, oh, if I was doing it again, this is where I would start, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, if I was doing it again, that's where I'd start. So I took my success in selling hardware and thought it would just translate directly into software. It did not. I failed in my first year as a software seller. My attainment was basically minimal at best. I ended up getting laid off. And looking back, like that was on me. It's because wasn't I wasn't learning fast enough. I also wasn't applying myself to learn fast enough. And I came in with the mindset that, hey, I'd done it in this other part of the world, other industry, like I can do it here. And I want to say, like, that is something you can do. So, like, I'm not trying to deter anyone from that, but I didn't take the time to learn all these other things. I should have been soaking more up and trying to, as a seller, no matter what you're selling, when you come into an org, you should always be thinking about how do I beat the learning curve? How do I beat the ramp time? And how do I get to productivity as fast as possible? Because that's what's going to make my sales leader, my VP of sales look good and look like they made a great choice. So whatever it takes to do that, do it.
Dude, you just blew my mind right on the spot there. No, seriously, it's like instead of thinking about it as breaking into tech, think about it as, hey, I want to make my VP look good, right? Hey, I want to make my manager look good, right? That they brought somebody in from the outside and this person has kind of blossomed into a superstar. That was a total perspective shifter for me. I love the talking about the lingo. That is advice I do not hear anyone giving and is so critical. Jacob, man, this is the widest ranging episode we have ever done. We chatted breaking into tech sales. We did 3 separate buyer stories. This has been outstanding. Let's wrap it up with one big takeaway, right? So obviously, if folks are still listening in here, we appreciate you if you are. They've heard a large variety of things now, right? We want to make sure that they take home one big takeaway, right? Like really retain that one thing. So what would be the one thing that you would want folks to take away from this episode and from you in general when it comes to sales?
Oh, that is a loaded question. I mean, I think this is going to be a bit of a pivot, and it's not something that we even really touched here, but maybe that makes the width even bigger, right? I'm really big on knowing your why, right? Why do you want to do something? What is it that's driving you to do that? So let's just make a quick example. If you want to get into tech sales, identify the why. Is it because you want to make a lot of money? Is it because you need to support your family? Is it because you want the growth and learning opportunities, the upwards mobility, software is not going in? Whatever it is, like identify your why and then reverse engineer from there. And like, again, an example of that, if you're trying to break in, like know all the lingo, speak in your buyer's language, because your buyer, when you're trying to break in, is actually your hiring manager. So speak their language with all those metrics and all that kind of stuff. So just stuff like that. I probably went all over the board, but you get where I'm coming from.
This was like fantastic. I mean, I seriously cannot put enough emphasis on how much width we just covered in this amount of time. I'm like looking for clips to snip out of this one is going to take me a while because there's so many things we got to cover. Well, and that's a compliment. That's a compliment too because there's so much stuff to pull out of this. Man, had a blast. I mean, I honestly forgot we were on camera right now recording. Obviously, we talked about a lot, Jacob. Why don't you plug something with the audience?
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate being here. Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, the biggest thing for me is follow me on LinkedIn, and it's not because I'm trying to up my follower count. Like I'm just throwing things out there that have happened to me or that I think can help other people. I think the platform is so powerful. So if one thing I post can help our listeners today, like get a job, close a deal, get a meeting, like I've done my job. So please follow me there. And yeah, I'll be throwing stuff out on the daily.
I'll be a big +1 on that. I have seen Jacob post stuff and I read it and I'm like, man, somebody's going to close a deal and literally make money because they saw that post. So low key, maybe you should be charging, but obviously I know that you do this out of goodness and out of wanting to help people. Man, can't say enough good things. This was a blast. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. We will see you next week. It won't be another 3 for 1, so enjoy this one while it's here.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.